Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the second of our live streams. Welcome to UK Jewish Fundraising Now II, a little virtual conference we have put together to support those who work in the Jewish charity sector through this this crisis that we're going through. Our aim is to build on the great work that Simi and others who have already done on the Jewish Community Professionals chat on Facebook. It's a great place to share and help each other out. We've got two brilliant speakers joining us today. So please, if you are watching via the Facebook group, ask questions. It should be quite easy just to send a comment through. And it'd be great to pass these on to our speakers. Now, the areas we're looking to cover today, we have a lay leader's point of view. So we're all people on the group are professionals. It's great to have a lay leader who wears many hats and can talk about the challenges lay leaders and boards, chairs, vice chairs, and trustees are facing. And Brexit, remember that. Now, Brexit may not be in the news, but hopefully technology allowing, we thought it'd be very valuable to hear from colleagues in Europe about what the situation is in Jewish communities across Europe. And finally, I'll be sharing some fundraising thoughts and resources from the fundraising world that I've picked up over the last week or so. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us if you joined us last time as well. I'd like to hand over to my co-host Simi. Simi, happy Pesach. How are you? What's going on? How are you feeling? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, how are you? Seems like such a loaded question these days, doesn't it? A mixture of emotions, I think, is generally the answer for everybody. I mean, it's been a week of highs and lows, and doing Seder at home, personally for us, first night was really, really difficult, and second night we kind of rallied and got through all the songs and enjoyed ourselves. I think this week for the community has been really, really difficult because we've suffered some losses of particularly prominent members of our community. Every life is valuable, but there's something very emotive seeing your entire Facebook feed flooded with tributes to the same people and hearing these stories and seeing these stories and people that have had such a big impact on our community and names that you kind of thought would be around forever because they've been around forever. And I think that there's just something very sad about that, but also something to be celebrated. And I think that with so much loss surrounding everyone right now, it's really important that we do take time to reflect on the lives that were rather than just the lives that have been lost. So I hope that people do take some time, maybe at the end of this call, to themselves to just think about those people and enjoy the relationships they had that were made by being part of our community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so true. I mean, it's, I know that sometimes our community, we feel like we're in a bubble and we have bubbles of bubbles. And then when you watch the national news or the international news to see what's going on around the world, but when it's happening to people that you know of, as you say, for many years, or you've met sometimes around a board meeting or just at some events, it really, or even people who were mentors and leaders, it really, or donors or philanthropists or whatever, it's a really horrible time that we are in. How are your Seders?
Yeah, Seder was interesting. Loud on Zoom before Yontef came in, and then it felt very strange to stop that part and just be three of us here. But actually, for me, the most powerful Seder story I've heard this year was actually from the hospital in Jerusalem, Shari, and one of the nurses is sharing updates whenever she feels that she has something worth sharing. And she shared this incredible update where she was sitting in the operations room because they don't go into the COVID ward unless they have to. And they were allowed to put on a Seder for people that were inside this isolation unit. So it was probably, ironically, one of the world's biggest Seders this year that was safely held for those patients. And the day before Yontef started, a rabbi came in with coronavirus, and he was well enough to lead a Seder for them. So they had this beautiful moment collectively of coming together as Jews and celebrating and remembering our history. And the nurse said, you know, I cannot help but feel, just as we were supposed to feel like the Jews in Egypt, that these people, with the mixture of fears and emotions and not knowing what's happening next, but having the faith that they had, is about as close as you will get to the original Yetziat Mitzrayim as we get. So it was an incredibly powerful story that I was happy to have read.
Oh, well, listen, as I say, next year in Jerusalem, not everybody, you know, leave some space at the buffet table. So, you know, okay. So I think it's time that we brought on our first guest. Would you like to do the introductions?
I'm going to introduce Debbie Fox.
Okay.
So Debbie is somebody that I've personally known for a long time in the community, and I honestly lose track of how many organisations have been blessed with Debbie's input. Debbie has a unique position right now of being a chief executive of a charity and of having various chair, vice chair and trustee roles of different charities. So I might let Debbie explain what she wants to say about the various hats that she wears and share a unique perspective right now of being in that professional world as well as being a lay leader. So over to you, Debbie, and thank you.
Well, thank you both, Simi and Ben. And yes, I'm not actually blushing, but I am actually. I really appreciate was part of your audience last week, and I found that both helpful and inspiring. And I suppose I sit here today happy and flexible about what hats I'm wearing. Perhaps most relevant in terms of information that I can share is through my JLC lens as vice chair of the JLC. I'm very happy to give you some headlines as to how we're supporting our members and the wider Jewish charity sector, and most interested to be able to hopefully answer your questions. And then if there is time and or interest, I'm very happy to speak about other lenses. As Simi said, I am executive director of a small charity outside the Jewish community who are supporting young people in disadvantaged communities. But let's just start so far as the JLC is concerned, and not to want to make any assumptions, but some of you may be really familiar with the work and some familiar with the work. We're a membership organisation. We have 35 members, and our driver is to support and strengthen Jewish communal organisations, and really most pertinently right now to also connect and coordinate. And we are very motivated to be doing that. Not just our members, but I'm happy and rightly believe that we should be supporting the wider Jewish charitable sector as well. So sort of very early on, the immediate step we took was to work with members to identify the impact of the crisis on their income, on their loss of income and on their income gaps. And as you probably all know, several member organisations at the moment that we went into this unprecedented situation had dinners in the communal calendar for end of May, June, and beyond. So never in these uncharted waters there was huge concern about how those particular organs would be impacted by that immediate need to cancel their major fundraising events of the year. We then, I feel quite proudly as an organisation, went ahead of the Chancellor and the government's announcement as to how we would support the sector in identifying that our efforts, our generosity, our energy had to be channeled into funding for frontline social care. And please forgive me if this is too granular, or on the chat, just stop me. But you may be aware that the steps that we've taken, and when I say we, I'm talking about the Jewish Leadership Council working with our members, have basically been in two waves. The first wave was the Jewish Homes Emergency Appeal, which has been an initiative of 3 care home providers, the 3 main care home providers in the country: Jewish Care, the Fed in Manchester, and Nightingale Hammerson. And the JLC worked with them to support the campaign that they have run over these past 2 weeks for emergency funding for Jewish care homes. At the same time, we have been and are acutely aware that vulnerable people extends way beyond elderly people in care homes. And so we have worked with a group of other frontline social care providers over the last 10 days and are almost at the stages of where we are going to be launching an appeal for the Jewish social care sector in order to raise the emergency funds that those social care organisations need. And they are the organisations frontline, so to younger people and older people across the spectrum, learning disability, mental health. And I can sort of just run through what that who are in that cohort. They are Norwood, Kisharon, Langdon, Jamie, Cancer, JWA, Camsim, the Leeds Board, and JB. Made priority for JLC to secure funds. And I can, if anyone's interested, I can sort of talk about mechanisms around that in a moment. But I highlight that because I feel it's important to identify that this model of coming together is how we have, as a community, started to behave as never before. And I see that across the piece. I am also really aware that whilst we are prioritising frontline social care, we have a whole host of other charities that make up the very fabric of what we are today as a community that celebrates culture and our glue and our diversity and our tikkun olam and our social action. And I'm very, very aware that those charities will also need ongoing support. So we are where we are today. I think Simi has asked me to sort of touch on the sort of things that we're doing across the lay and the professional piece in terms of coming together. And I can say that I am experiencing at first hand enormous collaboration. So we are, obviously, as trustee board, we are in constant communication with one another, and many on the board sit as chairs of member organisations, not all, but some. In addition to that, we have pulled together fora that enable chairs to have their conversations, CEOs and chairs, and also an HR function. So there is a lot of communication across communal organisations that is happening, and I think provide the essential means by which we are going to be able to have a sound strategy in order to deal with not just the immediate, but also the next wave, and how we behave and position ourselves as we, please God, come out of this. I'm going to stop and take some questions, but before I do so, I just want to say something to those of you who have joined us today, and to say that from those who I knew were coming on, and I don't know who is actually on the webinar, in the roles that you are performing, you are the backbone of support to your organisations. And without your effort, we know that the world would stop turning. So I pay a debt of gratitude to all of you, and to acknowledge how tough this is, and to say that what Simi and Ben are doing is fantastically valuable. Use the group, use each other to share your expertise, to share your best practice, of which there are so many examples. And also, and we talked about the human part of all of this that overrides everything at the end of the day, peer support. It's lonely. It's lonely physically, and it's lonely spiritually, and it's lonely emotionally. And we need to make sure that we support one another. We know that those are the acts of support and chesed and kindness that is the glue that is keeping us together. And there has never, ever been a greater imperative for collaboration. And I know that our funders, our foundations, our philanthropists want to see it. I'm hearing it wherever I go. So keep sharing your ideas, sharing your events, sharing your information, because all of that will be part of your story. It will be part of our story as we go out of it. I am going to allow others to speak.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you. And please submit your questions. If you're watching on the Facebook group, you can write your questions in there. Debbie, the thing that I wanted to ask you is whether you're seeing relationships changing between fundraising, not just the fundraising professionals, but that's who we have on the group today, but the lay professional relationship is something that is much talked about. And I was just wondering, purely anecdotally from your own experience, if you're seeing the nature of your relationships changing.
It's a really good question, Simi, and I'm so glad you asked it, because I have to say, really struck by that. We had a call last week of the organisations that I mentioned, the social care organisations, CEOs and chairs, and we know that there are some great people that have actually done the relationship. Michelle James being one national partnership, and I have to say that I was overwhelmed by the sense of between CEOs of individual organisations, but also across that piece, and the ability to listen to other, the ability to hear, the ability to actually share really transparently their needs, and the recognition that some of them were showing towards one another by saying, do you know what, we're not first in line and we won't push to be first in line, was so unprecedented in my time, and felt very, very inspired and grateful to see that shift.
That's amazing. That's really heartwarming. It actually makes me quite emotional to think about it. I mean, we've had similar experiences in the Chief Executives Forum and informal groups that I'm in, but it's nice to know that it's happening at that level. And one thing that we talked about the last time we had a group talk, and I think it's equally important to raise every time, is about remembering that there are people behind the job title. So whether you are chairing the JLC, or whether you are a chief fundraiser for an organisation, whether you're an events organiser, whatever you do, the person behind the title is more important than the title, as important as whatever job you're doing right now. And I suppose the question that I have is, what if you're able to share, if you feel open enough to share, what support systems you've got at the moment to help you deal with your communal side of what you're working on right now, and if you have any advice to people on how to seek out help if they're not usually very good at asking for it.
Again, yeah, thanks for raising that, Simi, and I think it's a bit of a work in progress at the minute, that I probably speak for many of us in that, you know, in normal times, we know where our go-tos are, and we are pretty competent at getting on with it and kind of taking the knocks. I think these are so different, and I think just to be incapacitated because you are unwell in some sense is probably for my personal experience, it was the first time that I felt I can't just keep going. I actually have to say, can someone help me? And that in itself was a big change in how I approach life. But it was also really liberating and really helpful. On a practical level, I got the help I needed. And on a psychological level, you suddenly think there are people out there that have so much that they can give, and the skill and the expertise and the willingness, particularly now, to step in. We should all be really aware of that, and we should actually, in a moment of reflection, think about, who are our existing support systems, but who are we missing out in that, and where can we go? Let's identify the gaps. A, a forum like this is a fantastic way of bringing people together to be able to see who's out there. What are we missing, and can we access that support? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And I was going to ask, are there any thoughts or reflections that you've had on the difference between being a lay leader and a professional right now, or has it all just blurred together? Is everything similar and labels just dissolve and you just get the job done? Or are you seeing that there is a difference in the way that you think about things at the moment as a professional or as a lay leader?
Interesting question. I think that I'm constantly sort of grateful for the learning I get from both sides and the transferability of that. So I learn a huge amount in my lay role around strategy and around oversight and responsibility, and how to support the professional network. And I guess when I'm sitting on the other side of the table, I feel that I am better equipped to help colleagues and to help my trustee board with some best practice and expertise that I've learned from this community, which is a beacon in so many ways. And I know that in good times we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up or criticizing, but what is coming out is just how talented, how well organized, how committed we are, lay and professional. And I think I'd be really interested to hear from both of you and others whether you feel those boundaries are blurring at this point, or there any shifts.
Well, yeah, I think from my perspective, it's and as somebody involved with Jamie, I think it can be celebrated, the fact that people are human. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the first one in the office, the last one to leave. All those kind of expectations we had of the right way to work have gone out the window, and people are working out, sometimes for the first time, what actually works for them. And I really hope that one of the positives in all of this is that we come out of this in a way that people feel empowered to know what works for them, know what works for their organization, so that they can give their best to their organization, and that lay leaders and chief execs will be able to give themselves the space to say yes to creating a new environment for the best possible outcome. So I'm hopeful of the future in amidst all the other very difficult decisions and changes that will need to happen.
I'd like to add to that this concept of lay leader. I work across a number of non-Jewish national charities, and they don't have the word lay leader. It's maybe volunteer or trustee, many are not as close or have the privilege of being as close to their trustees as we are in our Jewish community. You could attend the same synagogue as one of your trustees. You could be related to a trustee if you work for an organization. So there is this sort of, I mean, I've been in fundraising for over 20 years there. There was a them and us, and the them and us is slowly I've seen that eroded. And I think that, you know, I am sure that trustees, and I'm a trustee of a charity, and the people that I work with who are the professional members of the staff, we just see each other as people who have got skills, and we've got a role to play. And, you know, we need everybody to play their part, no matter where they are in the process. If they're the ones creating the strategy, then fine. If they're the people, there's no strategy if it can't be executed. So you need the doers as well. And then there's going to have to be the people that do the following up. I know one charity where somebody's still making the trip in every day to collect the post. And the only member of the team just is doing that just because, you know, that has to be done. So Debbie, I think, you know, thanking the people, thanking the workers is a fantastic thing. And I think, you know, we thank on behalf of the people watching, and is you know, somebody has to organize, and we're organizing this for one group, you're organizing for another group, and, you know, thank goodness there's people who are organizing, because when communities don't organize, then it's a bit of a mess. So no, thank you very much. Simi, any last comments before, and maybe Debbie can stick on the line, and then we can maybe ask some questions if anyone watching would like to add anything. Simi?
For sure.
Oh, you're muted. 1 second. Simi's muted.
Only to say thank you, Debbie. It's when you're entrenched in your day job working for a charity, it's easy to forget how many other people are there making things happen on the lay side of things. So thank you for reminding us about the other cogs in the machine that keep things going, and thank you.
No, my pleasure. And of course I'll stay on, because I'm really interested to hear from Mario, and continue to hear from both of you, and happy to answer questions.
Great. Okay, thank you. Right. Thank you, Debbie. So we're going to move on now to our second guest, if technology allows us. Our second guest is Mariano Slimovic. He's the Executive Director of the ECJC. This is the European Council of Jewish Communities. It's a membership organization that works with over 65 European Jewish charities and organizations from all over Europe. Mariano himself speaks English, French, Spanish, Hebrew, and Italian, and he lives just outside Florence in the hills. So hopefully we can get hold of Mariano. I feel like asking for the votes from the European Song Contest here. So Mariano, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. I know that being stuck in the hills is beautiful for a suntan, but may not be so great for Wi-Fi. So Mariano, it'd be fantastic just if you could just share, before I ask some questions. Italy has had it really bad. How are you, and how is Italy?
Well, here in Italy it's already 40 days, not 40 years, well, it's Pesach, but it feels like 40 years that we're in seclusion. Even in the last weeks we had a shadow of hope. These days it's coming lower with the second wave, and we're expecting to hear. But me being based in Italy and following, you know, in close the Italian communities, also probably as one of the first ones, enabled us as a European organization to try to develop a strategy. We serve over 65 Jewish organizations from all over Europe, from different sizes, from communities with 500 members to organizations that have 1,500 employees. So how can we justify our existence in a period where we are mostly known by the annual conferences that we do for our different groups, that is social welfare, education, and sports, community development, and organizations pay a membership fee through their organization to participate, to belong, and to bring their voice to the board. So we need to give responses, and I think that what it was like is that we had a very effective and operative executive committee that, together with the team, we decided to immediately jump. So we have been extremely active since the 9th of March, updating the whole website, trying to redraft instructions from the World Health Organizations into notes that community organizations can understand and can be relevant to them. The first week was contacting everyone to see what their needs on the field was. We realized that there were a lot of needs in the field. For example, schools in Italy realized that the whole school needs to pass on Zoom on a Friday night, so they did not have the chance of getting back to school to get the material. So from one day to the other one, they need to improvise. How can we as a European organization respond to that? So we started to be in touch with different schools, with different teachers, and we started to recreate Zoom calls for the teachers on how to Zoom their lessons. We started to create spaces for people not only to talk, but also to be heard. I think that's one of the most valued things that people are appreciating. We changed to be a provider only, to be half provider and half, I listen to you, I'm here for you. And we have extremely different realities of the same what's going on in Romania, where they don't have masks and alcohol in gel, whether in UK. Or, for example, last weekend in Amsterdam in the old age home, 15 Jewish people dead and 22 with symptoms of COVID. So every community is passing by their own reality. We were quite lucky that in 2015, through a generous grant, we started to create programs for the communities for crisis management. Yeah. And this was originated by the terrorist attacks in the Ibercacher and etc., where we realized that communities were vulnerable and they did not have any crisis management plans. I think that fortunately for that time, it was clear that there was a chance of being able to identify who the enemy was, or you will try to feel safe by avoiding going to kosher supermarkets, or you will know that if you were your keeper in the street, you would feel more vulnerable. But this situation where the enemy is invisible and it does not respect ranks or roles, it can attack rabbis or children or old age home, it's really putting an extra note on the stress of the teams. We are being quite lucky, and I really like what Gerda has said. We also started to work a lot in collaboration with other major organizations, and we found that at this time, even if we initiated many things, there are other initiatives that are very worthy to follow, and we're working together. The only thing that I will add to what Debbie has said is, in addition of receiving the membership fee, we realized something that probably was not very clear or very strong before, that is the issue of gratitude. We are feeling how our affiliated members are grateful for us being there, even bombarding them with Zoom calls. Everybody's zoomed out at these days. But we want them to know that we are there. We are manning our Facebook page. Most of the time, emails are being priority answered and delegated to whoever needs to be. The executive committee is calling all the different members in a personal call, an informal call, and the team is calling the different services, teachers, young directors and organizations to constantly check in on everyone in the field.
Thank you, Mariana. That's great, and it's interesting actually, because when we did the first stream and we asked for questions, one of the questions was about membership organizations. So yeah, I think hopefully you've answered that question, which is, a lot of emphasis is on charities who are delivering frontline care, and then there'll be another tier behind that and another tier. And Martin, who was our guest speaker in the first stream, was talking about how to make yourself relevant as a charity if you're not on the front line. And the question was, if you're a membership organization, if you're not actually delivering a service to an individual, are you still relevant? But what you've said has been fantastic, and you said something which Debbie said and which came through last time, which was about collaborations as well. A question from me is, have you been surprised by the ability that some Jewish communities in Europe have had to be able to adapt, and some where you thought perhaps the larger ones have been quite slow? So have the smaller ones been quick, and the big ones with their bureaucracy and their committees and their infrastructure, or is it really just anyone's been doing whatever they can?
Well, the response actually has been tremendous and very positive. That does not mean that all the responses have been good, but even a bad response in time like that is better than paralysis. Where we've seen that, previously in many European communities there was this feeling of like, we survived the Shoah, so we're going to be here forever. And there were many indicators during the years, like community closing, synagogues being sold or flats. But this situation, I think, that really moved everyone to try to active. And I found a lot of positive examples, but I also, unfortunately, realized that whether now we're working together, for many years we have not worked together, and there is a lot of overlapping. There is not a name for a general coordination, and sometimes that makes things difficult. I think that organizations with more resources were able to come up with more answers than other ones that are limited by their resources. But again, our role was to try to leverage and try to share the expertise of those ones in the field with the ones that, that they can use that expertise. For example, we ran out last week a Zoom call that it was facilitated by Jamie on burnout and mental health of the employees, that we had 27 different services of Jewish welfare in Europe, where it's a reality that they are experimenting these days. And that was a contribution of Jamie to the rest of the affiliated. And, each organization is different, but in that kind of a field, everyone can take, the small contribution or the huge contribution and apply to their own services.
And Mariana, we've got a question. We've got a question that's come through the Facebook from Martin Berliner from Maccabi GB, and I think that you spoke at it regarding trustee about generational views on this, and you mentioned that the older people perhaps are are more stoic in their, more grounded in their views to this. Are you seeing any attitudes in younger trustees? Are they more agile with digital technologies? Are they teaching their older colleagues, or is it just sort of everybody is getting online at the same time with the program, would you say?
Oh, it was a forced introduction to the latest technology and everything for everyone. Even the most savvy on internet now, they are, we are thinking Zoom, if we should be using Zoom or another platform. But I think that the need is forcing us to be, to learn to swim by being thrown into the river.
Yeah.
And I would not make a difference between generations. I can speak that I've been in touch with people from 20 years old to 80 years old, and each one has their own things to contribute from their experience. You're willing to go further, and we're here to serve them all.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, Simi, do you have anything that you'd like to ask Mariano?
Hi, Mariano. The question that I wanted to ask is, obviously Britain and Europe is still a sore sore point for some, but we are part of the European Jewish community. And I wondered if there was anything you saw that members of international Jewish communities can be doing to support each other, even if it's sending messages of support. Is there anything as professionals that are working as part of a global Jewish community we can be doing for each other right now?
Well, great question, Simi. I am happy to say that for us, Brexit is a concept that does not work or exist. For us, Europe included the former Soviet Union and communities such as Morocco and Tunis. So we were always quite advanced into that. And we have a big fruit in the UK. Our president is from the UK. We have affiliated organizations from the UK, and actually the surprise was that most of the time the UK organizations are providers of expertise. And in this field, it was a major opportunity of trying to liaise with other colleagues. I have been based in UK, and I'm aware that sometimes UK tends to watch, more inside than outside. And I think that this period is fruitful to start, strengthening the connection.
Yeah, let's hope that it does. Let's hope that it does. Mariana, thank you so much for the time being, for giving us a view of what's going on over the channel and our friends and family and colleagues in the European Jewish community. Please stay on the line if you can, and if we've got any questions that will come back at the end. So thank you, Mariano. So I'm just going to talk just for a couple of minutes. We've got about 6 minutes left on the stream, about some fundraising thoughts and ideas that have come to me and come to me from different forums and opportunities that I'm involved with across the fundraising sector, the fundraising industry. And I think I'd like to share these if I can. Excuse me. So we know obviously that the Chancellor announced a package of support for charities, and it was £750 million of funding was announced. These were for charities responding to the crisis in the UK. Obviously, 750 million is a drop in the ocean, and it's very much a drop compared to what businesses have been given. And I know that the sector is lobbying the government for further funding, and 370 of that is going to go to small and medium-sized charities via the National Lottery Fund, the Community Fund, and another 360 is going to go to hospices and St John's ambulances, etc., and Citizens Advice. Interestingly enough, the government have also said that they're going to match the BBC's Big Night in Charity appeal. That's next Thursday, I believe, with a donation up to £20 million to the National Emergencies Trust. Comic Relief and Children Need Together, two huge charities raising a huge amount of money every year. Be interesting to see what they raise next Thursday. So just a couple of resources I'd like to share with you, if that's okay. So there's an organisation called the Beacon Collaborative that is funded by several UK organisations with an interest in philanthropy, including the Pears Foundation, and they have launched 3 new reports. They can be found on their website or on the Institute of Fundraising's website, and they came out this morning. And one of these is of particular interest in major donor fundraising, and it's called the Giving Experience and Overcoming the Barriers to Giving Among the Wealthy in the UK. It's an excellent report, and they interviewed over 1,000 wealthy individuals in September and October last year. So obviously their views were of then in time rather than now. But the key thing about this report is that it is UK-based major donors. So a lot of major donor reports that we see as fundraisers are usually American or American and European, but this is just solely UK. So I'll put the link in the Facebook group about that. The second one is an excellent website called the Charity Excellence Framework, and they have a updated list of over 400 plus links to organizations who are offering COVID-19 crisis related funding. So that's something to check out. That's the Charity Excellent Framework. Second thing I just wanted to talk about briefly is obviously following last Wednesday, just before Pesach's announcement that the Jewish Chronicle and the Jewish News have been put into liquidation. You know, it really sent a shockwave through the community, and actually it trended on social media for charities, for Jewish charities. They've been a big part for many years of what Jewish charities do, not only by putting articles in to promote the causes or to get views, for donor care for births, marriages and deaths, paid advertisements to promote appeals. The list goes on. I believe at the moment they're continuing online, but perhaps once the crisis is over, charities need to start thinking about how to engage with maybe an older demographic who rely on those two print papers in particular. There are other print papers in the Jewish community, but those two are the biggest, about how to get their messages across about what the charities are trying to achieve in the news. So there'll be a bit of a hole on your Shabbos table for the reading for the time being, but maybe in this vacuum there might be a new publication. 3 more tips on fundraising to go. One is about data. Now, databases either gets people really excited, or the fundraisers really, you know, turn off about databases. But no matter what you think about them, now actually, and this is a great tip that I've been told to pass on, is a great opportunity if you've got the capacity, if you've got members of your team that can work from home and have access to your database, to actually start doing a bit of database tidying up, perhaps doing some pruning and weeding and amending and tidying up names and addresses. Teach your colleagues, if they're not so good about reporting, or doing some Excel analysis. Maybe spread out some tasks amongst the team, or if you work by yourself or with a small team, maybe do some database stuff that you can do. You could perhaps do some prospect researching and find some segments of people that you've never considered before. So also look at who your database supplier is. If it's Access for Thank You, or Blackboard for Razor's Edge, or for Donify, Salesforce, contact them, because presumably you're still paying a monthly fee or a yearly fee, and they should be giving you a great service, particularly now. So go onto their websites. I know many of them have lots of free content that they are sharing. My penultimate point is about linking with data, and perhaps now is a good time. We've spoken about lay leaders and trustees, but your volunteer fundraisers, people that you work with, committee chairs, or people that help you with events. When things get going, there's going to be a big number of events want to take place, and now is a good opportunity to go through those event lists and look at the data, and maybe ask your committee chairs or your trustees responsible for fundraising if there's any new information they can find on their lists, if they brought their table hosts, or if they brought regular people to breakfasts, or to brought them to briefings that you organize. So now is a good time to do some prospect researching. And the final point I'd like to share is, we've spoken about major donors and keeping in contact with people, but the one age group that I think it's a great time to engage with is the difficult, people call them the difficult 21 to 35-year-olds, the young donors. If you have a chair of a young committee, or you're thinking of setting up a young committee, use your data to find out the right people who this could be, or speak to your older trustees to see if they've got any family members, or they know of people up and coming that can be involved in this. If you have got these young people, speak to them, because I know that when I was chair of a young section for a charity 20 years ago or so, and I was sitting around the board table with some very influential members of the community who were trustees. I had lots of questions to ask, but felt a bit embarrassed to ask them in front of such a forum. So maybe this is a good opportunity to build good relationships with your young committee chairs, find out if there's areas about the charity that they'd like to know about, teach them about what you're doing, and they perhaps may wish to do some fundraising for you. So let's not just think about our major donors or individual givers, but think about the young people as well. So they were just some top tips that have come to me over the last week or so. I wanted to share with you. I'm just seeing now if we have any questions that have come in from Facebook. I'm just looking through here now. I don't think we have. If we've got, Simi, we've still got, I believe we've got Mariano still on the line, and we've got Debbie on the line. There we go. If there's anything that, other than thank you, any last questions that you've got before we wrap it up, Simi?
Well, I just wanted to raise the example of Captain Tom Moore, who you may have heard of in the press. He's this incredible 99-year-old army veteran who is using his Zimmer frame, going around his garden, doing a sponsored walk to fight, to support the NHS workers through coronavirus. And he's raised, I think to date, he's raised over £1 million already. He's on 1.4 million, which is something quite incredible. And the reason that I raise him as an example is because extraordinary things are happening from the most unexpected places right now when it comes to charity fundraising. And I wondered if you had any, maybe not a Tom Moore kind of an example, but if you had seen anything unexpected happening in the community right now, particularly of a fundraising nature, but if not, then anything pretty inspiring that you thought would be a nice note to end on for people.
I'm going to give a shout out to the Corona Care Challenge that was started by a family who had just in that week before lockdown had lost their grandfather. They are a family that are very well known to me, and they started something that seemed like a good enough idea, but it was very, very hard to predict what the need may be. And they have just mobilized an army of volunteers and of generous people who continue to donate, and they are actually providing a range of services, predominantly to isolated people in terms of a shopping for basic needs service, as well as tapping into a huge number of restaurants and caterers who are now donating their eyes and their food. And this week announced that they are also providing some funds to the Brompton Hospital to buy ventilators. So it was an idea that started with the bread and mill and is now as broad as that. So shout out to Corona Care, and I know that kind of work is being replicated in so many different places. I don't think that we ever will say that we're at saturation point, which is so ironic given that we talk a lot about fatigue, donor fatigue, and yet we're just seeing the most extraordinary acts of generosity, and long may that be.
Absolutely, yeah. Mariano, is there anything that you've seen or any last comments to add?
No, I think that we have right now all our batteries put together with our members to try to start thinking and building, how the scenario would be, or how can we imagine, and start to be prepared for the new reality, because clearly we're going to come out different.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's things like this, and it's people. Thank you to everybody who's been watching on Facebook, and because your questions and your comments validation that this is needed. So that's great for us. I'd like to thank Debbie and Mariano for their time today and for their amazing input. It's so interesting to get to, always interesting speaking to both different perspectives, but and thank you both for what you're doing in every organization that you're involved with. So thank you to Simi. Thank you for what you're doing on the Facebook group. The numbers have increased since the last stream, and let's hope they keep increasing. And Simi and I thought it might be nice if we could make the next one a bit more interactive, and we could do a Zoom, and we'll publicize this on the Facebook group, that if people wanted to do a big Zoom and come with some challenges or some questions that they've got for the group, then maybe we could all share together. So that hopefully be on the 28th of April, but we'll be posting about that. So if that's all, Simi, thank you again for co-hosting, for your time in this.
Thank you, Ben,
it's a
for
pleasure.
pulling it all together.
Yeah, wish everybody a happy last few days of Pesach. Let us continue doing what we're doing, and let all those who are not well get healthy. So there we go. Okay, thank you, everybody. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.